Welcome back to another edition of the Wolverine.com podcast. This is our video version with Doug Skene, a.k.a. Drew Carey. Looking good with those specs, man. So, big win for Michigan over Washington. Easier than expected. Not the loss that you predicted. We're going to have to talk about your season prediction after this as we move on. And I know that you are thrilled to have been wrong. Period. End of story. So, Northern Illinois is coming up, but I want to talk about a few things first about the Washington game. And number one, the lack of passing. And I understand, and everybody has said it, and I've said it too, when you're running the ball as well as you are and making the adjustments you're making and the backs are hitting the holes, that is something that you continue with. I do think that they could have run a little more play action in there, sprinkled a little bit more in. I didn't think Cade McNamara looked very comfortable. And in watching the film, your thoughts on that? Was this one of those things where, well, A, we know it was that they adjusted the game plan during the game because they were running the ball so well. But to me, it seemed like more would have opened up in the passing game and you could have done more with play action. Was it a case of they kept the safeties back so they weren't able to do it, or what did you see?
Well, Balas, what I saw, and by the way, yes, very happy to be wrong with my prediction of Michigan wins. That's always a good thing. And just as a side note, for anybody that wonders, one of my good friends from Michigan has a kid who's playing on that team. Why on earth would I want them to have anything other than high levels of success? Aiden Hutchinson obviously had a big night, so I'd like to officially dispel. I don't want Michigan to suffer. I want them to have had success exactly like we saw on Saturday night. That is a great thing. My prediction going into that game was based on past practice and what we had seen out of Michigan a year ago coming off of a big win and the opponents, the big loss, et cetera, yada, yada, yada. So for the record, I want Michigan to win. That doesn't mean they're always going to, so I have to be objective as I can. So I'm glad to be wrong. But what I noticed in the game Saturday night was a Michigan football team that was developing a running game early. You go back and watch that game, a lot of first downs. We're getting 3, 4, 5 yards a crack. And when you can do that consistently, there's no need to put the ball in the air. There just isn't. If I were Jim Harbaugh and Josh Gaddis and the rest of that offensive staff, I would have played it the same way. If you can grind somebody into the ground and mix them up like cheap hamburger and throw them to the side, that's what you do. And so, yeah, it would have been nice to see a dynamic passing attack out of Cade McNamara and a super effective play action running game. But we didn't need to do that because we were beating their ass so well. We just kept doing it. So I'm not stressed at all about it, but that doesn't dismiss the fact that the passing efficiency and the effectiveness of this quarterback is still a question. But in that situation, Saturday night, we crushed them with the run. The time for the passing game will come, but there was no reason to create questions and pressure situations when you didn't need to. You were beating them handily up front.
What's the difference from what you've seen in the running game this year compared to last year? We saw a lot of counters last week, both the tackle and the guard pulling, doing a pretty nice job. The backs being patient, waiting for these guys to get to their blocks. Mike Hart talked about that today, Michigan's running backs coach, and he said, you can't really teach vision. You can't really teach being able to make a safety miss, but you can teach these guys where the holes are supposed to be and the patience to wait for it. Now, Blake Corum really gets a little skittish at times, but and last year we saw it, but I thought he was extremely patient. And to me, that line did a really nice job of getting hat on a hat and getting movement, which I didn't think they got a whole lot of last week, the week before.
Yeah. So two things stand out to me with why this team is running the football so well 2 games into the season here. First of all, it looks as though they're comfortable. Up front, we see a lot of very similar run strategy. They're blocking down on the front side, and they're pulling a backside guard. They're bringing a backside tight end over, or they're pulling the backside guard and tackle over to the front side to block the end of line and or the front side linebacker in a combination of a different thing. So what that means is the front side of these blocks are almost all the same for the front side. You're gap blocking. You're putting that inside foot lateral, and you're getting upfield, and you're either combo blocking or you're combo blocking unblocked with your line mate to the next level. Repetition, repetition, repetition. You get good at that. So a lot of the plays look and feel the same for those front side blockers. That includes the tight end. Backside guys are guard and tackle. You start doing this over and over and over in practice. You like anything else, you get good at it. So there's a familiarity and a simplicity to what they're trying to do on the ground so far, 2 weeks into the season. Secondly, these running backs, again, credit to the running back coach, Mike Hart. I've seen progress in these two guys coming out of last year and in the first 2 weeks. Haskins had a nice run early where he was patient, waited for his guard to get around. If it's a guard or tackle, it was going to the north end of the field. And he broke one for 10, 15 yards early in the football game. And then later, Corum showed the same kind of patience. And what that means is they understand where that hole is supposed to be, and they don't beat their blocker to it. They let that block develop. They let that guard or that pulling tight end or the tackle or all three of them get to where they need to be before they make their move. And that lets them get into a position of success. In the meantime, it keeps those defenders wondering where that running back is going to go. And one of the big Corum runs, we didn't get to the front side linebacker. He went unblocked, but Corum made a great cut and baited him into the inside and then did a jump cut out to his left and cracked off 10, 15 yards. Could have been more had he not lost his balance. So what I really see, Balas, is a lot of similarities in what they're asking these guys to do. And if I only ask you to do a couple things up there, you practice it every day from spring all the way through fall camp and now 2 weeks into the season, you're going to get good at it.
You know, you talked about it being 2 games, and that's what I want to caution here because we don't know how good Washington is, and they were not deep up front. And that's one of the things that Gaddis and Jim Harbaugh noticed was, okay, they aren't going to substitute a whole lot, so you can wear these guys down. And when you're having success like they did early, you're going to continue to do that, and these guys are going to get tired. You did it against a Washington team in the Rose Bowl one year where you absolutely dominated up front and had guys in tears at the end of the game, frankly. So I thought that was interesting. Number 2, though, is that there's no guarantee. You're going to see much better teams, and I think starting even with Rutgers, and I'm not saying Rutgers is going to stop Michigan on the ground or anything like that. People need to stop putting words into our mouths here. You know, one test is bigger than another, and you're going to see it, for example, when they get to Wisconsin. But the jury's still out here. This is not a team that's going to run for 350 yards every game because there are going to be defenses designed to stop them from doing that and with bigger and better personnel. And one more thing about that was Washington never really brought their safeties up, which really surprised me in that game. I didn't think they made very good adjustments. But to me, we're going to find out in Big Ten play what this offensive line is all about. So let's slow the roll here on anointing these guys as one of the best ever, right?
Well, it's a very good thing that you bring up there, Balas. So we've seen this movie before in the last few years. Maybe not last year, but the previous 2 years. A very successful, a very encouraging September. And then things get a little weird and uncomfortable in October, and then we finish with a big old fat thud at the end of November. So let's remember, yes, it's 2 games. The indicators are positive. There's some good things to point at and say, hey, this feels different. This looks a little bit different. But me personally, yourself, other fans, remember, this thing is a long season. There's a lot of football ahead. And at some point, when it comes to this running game, Michigan's going to run into a defensive front that is going to absolutely commit to not allowing them to run the football. They're going to have an extra guy up there that you do not have enough blockers for. And in that situation, offensive football requires you to check out of that run and throw it. That day is coming. It might even happen this Saturday against Northern Illinois. Even though they're a MAC team, if you just have too many guys to block, you're going to have a hard time running the football. So I wouldn't be surprised if Northern Illinois presses us on this thing. I don't know that they're going to have the horses to line up and just stop this running attack that Michigan has shown so far. They're going to have to creep those safeties up and force the issue. If I were the Northern Illinois coach, it's probably be one of my defensive game plans. So it's going to happen. And then certainly Rutgers, and then absolutely at Wisconsin. Don't think for a second they're going to sit there and just let you run the counter 46, 47G and crack off 300 yards in the ground. They're not going to allow it. You're going to have to throw the football.
Yep, and I want to make it perfectly clear that we are giving full credit to Michigan and the line for what they've accomplished in the first 2 weeks and say, hey, you can't do it much better than that, especially with a line that hasn't played together. And you've talked so often about how it takes lines time to gel. Well, you've got a first-time starter at left guard You've got Ryan Hayes, who's played a lot of left tackle. You've got a first-time starter, essentially, at right guard in Zach Zinter, who's playing a little bit banged up. But yet these guys are still playing pretty well together. From what I've seen, you talk about kind of knowing each other's tendencies up front. From what I've seen, these guys are really playing together well early on, and I think that's a great sign.
Well, it's a great sign. And then you heard some of their comments. I think Stuber made a comment after the game, and one of the other fellas did. Grinding people into the ground for 300 yards is exactly what linemen love. I mean, it's nothing but the best. And it's hard to get this feeling. You can see it physically on television, but when we watch the game, even if you're at the game in the stands, when you're standing in front of a defensive front and you come to the line of scrimmage and you can look that opponent right in the eye and you know he is mentally defeated, there is not many things better in the game of football than that feeling that you know you own this dude. And all the linebackers behind him, their hands are on their hips. They're looking at you like, please, let's get this thing over with and go get my chicken sandwich because I'm done with this. That is the best thing there is as an offensive line. And so far, certainly Saturday night, we saw elements of that. And it wasn't all that early late into the second or third quarter for sure. The game was still relatively tight, but I noticed the body language on the Washington front was starting to look deflated. All that credit goes to that Michigan offensive line, the tight ends and the running backs that were just wearing their asses out. It's awesome to watch. It's even better to be a part of. And it's even better when you can do that in tough games on the road, because not only are those defensive guys deflated, when you get to the sideline and you go up the tunnel after the game, you can look at all their friends and family and the fans on the road and know, yeah, we beat you too. And they're all defeated and they can't do anything but yell insults at you, which is fine anyway. That's what you get. But it's just a great feeling. Anytime you have a choice between beating someone on the ground into submission or passing your way into the end zone, offensive linemen will always take the ground grinder first. And that's what Michigan has shown. They may be pretty good at this year, but there's still a lot of questions to be answered.
Was it always a chicken sandwich, Skene? Was there ever anything else, a little variety in the postgame meal? Maybe
well, chicken sandwich is a generic thing. I think they give them Chick-fil-A, Balas, but we used to just get the white box. It was just a white box, and in there was a decent-sized sub, a bag of potato chips, and a king-size Snickers bar. And you always had to fight with Everett and Kakuzo because they might steal your Snickers bar if you're not careful. But those were good times. We weren't looking for those, but I know we sent more than one opponent up that tunnel waiting for their chicken sandwich and their box meal to get out of town because we just bludgeoned them to death. It's one of the greatest things you can do as an offensive lineman is just absolutely defeat someone and make them want to quit. Now, maybe that sounds a little insensitive these days, Balas, but that's old school college football, and it's just the best. It's just the absolute best. And you mentioned in that Rose Bowl when we had won that Rose Bowl in '93, and I know that goes back a while, but the story is still valid in that when you've beaten someone up and they know there's nothing you can do, and then you have a character like Steve Everett adding little vocalizations in there in between plays. we literally had defenders in tears crying. They were so upset about the way that we had manhandled them. And we had in that game, I've told this story before in our previous years of podcasting, we had Washington linebackers telling Everett to knock it off. That's enough. Leave him alone, right? The guy was so upset. And this is because there's a lot of smack talking going on up there. Usually it's the defensive lineman talking to us, and we don't have a whole lot of time to respond to it. But Steve was one of the best. And I'm sure Michigan's got one up there. There's always one in one group. There's always somebody who knows how to talk the talk. But more importantly than opening your mouth is how you beat somebody into the ground. And this is exciting that Michigan has shown early in the season they may have a chance to do this, but let's see what they can do against the bigger teams down the road.
I love linebackers. Leave Brittany alone. Yeah. It's just so good, man. What a great story. Great stuff. I want to talk about Andrew Vistardis. Here's a guy that previously I said, okay, they're going to be in trouble if Andrew Vistardis is playing center. And this was based not only on last year, in which he was, he was banged up too. And I'm gonna put that out there. Okay, he had some back issues in the spring. He had some issues, and Trevor Keegan, the left guard, talked about that today too. He said he had a hard time holding blocks because his back was so sore. And I'm thinking going into the season, man, if he's your starting center, you might have some trouble. Well, guess what? This kid has played his ass off, number one. And again, there are going to be bigger tests, but it comes back down to the strength program. Ben Herbert came up with something, Keegan said, where they do some back extensions and they really helped the Stardust's back. You can see him playing healthy. He had some cramps last game. He's going to be fine. But to me, it really starts with him. This line's improvement starts with him. I got to give a big nod to that kid because he's moving well. He's holding his blocks. He's a leader making all the right calls. That has been a position of strength, and I did not see that one coming.
Yeah, you and I both talked about the concern at the center position because of what we perceived to be some limited athletic abilities based on what the previous offensive line strategy we're asking him to do. We didn't think he could do it. He's absolutely proved you and I wrong that first week there. That one play where he got out on the edge and cut that guy out in space for that touchdown run was off the charts good. And again, happy to be wrong about this one. He has shown that he's absolutely improved himself over this offseason. And through 2 games, he's a very solid center. And he may be even be kid if he can continue to play this way, an all Big Ten candidate at the end of the season. I know it's a little early to say those kind of words, but if he can continue this performance, I think he's absolutely a candidate to be on that list. So that's a great thing because the center is the heartbeat of your offensive line. The center is calling out the calls, setting protections right, left, communicating things out. Not that the other guys don't say things too, because they do, but the center is the quarterback of the O-line. And so far, very good for Mr. Stardust. That's a good thing.
I'd like to plant the seed here. 7th year senior, buddy. Could just think about it, So
I would have taken an extra couple of years too. We would hell Balas, if we could still be, I think me and Everett and Kakuza, we'd still be there playing if we could.
That's not a bad gig. So got to ask you about a play. Chris Hinton on the defensive line gets to the quarterback. When you played, he gives him a little shove, and the guy goes flying backwards like he just got shot, by a machine gun, like Sonny at the toll booth, right? So I don't think that is, to me, a penalty even 10 years ago, but now you get the quarterbacks. And I understand you got to hold up. I'm not going to crucify this kid because you're there, and the second that he's releasing that ball, you got a chance to at least touch him, right? So he gives him a little bit of a patty cake shove, and he gets flagged on it. Was it a good call, and do you hate it as much as I do?
I hate it as much as you do, Balas. But I would also tell you this: I believe in the rule book. If you and I looked it up, I don't have a college rule book this year, but if you look it up, defensive linemen are expected to attempt to hold off after the quarterback has thrown the football, and when their arm is in the down ball released position. Yep. Defenders are expected to attempt to hold off, and in that replay, of course, you can do it in slow-mo. The quarterback's arm was down, the ball was gone, and Hinton reached out and gave him a little push in the chest. Technically, by the rule, it probably was a foul. I hate that rule, but it is what it is. But here's what I would say about that. And I don't advocate dirty football, but if you're going to hit the quarterback questionably, Mr. Hinton, don't just put 2 hands on him. Drill the crap out of him. Because if you're going to get a 15-yarder, you might as well make it a good one. And that was early in the football game. And so, this is the, we how many times have you heard me talk about make an impression on a quarterback early? Don't just stick your glove on him and tap him. Because if you're going to get 15, you might as well make it a worthy 15. And I know they're not going to coach that at Michigan, but if it's going to be close and the umpires are going to call it that way, then I would expect it down the line. Otherwise, when that ball gets gone and that arm is down, you got to lay off and put the hands up like you've never done anything wrong in your life out there in the football field. But he didn't do it. I hate the call, but this is football, right? We're trying to, at this point, protect the quarterback more than any other position on the field. And there is a danger element. The kid can fall back and hit his head against the ground, the concussions. I get it. It's real. But off the record, which is certainly not this medium here, but off the record, boy, if you're going to get a 15-yarder, you might as well make it a good one.
Mothers Against Former Linemen is going to be all over you on Twitter for these comments. I'm glad you don't have a Twitter account anymore. We'll get you Skene's address, people, for later because you're just so mean. All these stories, you were just so mean,
Yeah,
football, a violence.
Football. When I used to coach high school kids, and when I was coached, we were reminded that football is a violent game played best by violent people, but that only means inside the white lines of the field. And so we played in an era, in a time where violence was encouraged. We fed upon it. We got better because of it. We beat the absolute crap out of each other in practice during the week. And on Saturdays, we could not wait to impose our violent tendencies on opponents. I understand that, our culture and the way kids are taught nowadays from when they're very young, we don't want any bullying anywhere. And I'm not an advocate for that. We should all be respectful of other people. But when you put a helmet on and you step on that football field, in my belief, that's a different world, and one of the very few worlds and very few moments where we will turn the lights on. And if you're playing big time college football like they do in Ann Arbor, we'll turn on national television cameras and we will cheer when you beat the crap out of someone within the rules of the game. So that whole penalty thing, that's close. Quarterbacks are going to get hit. Defensive linemen are going to take their shots. I believe it to be part of the game. I still want this game to be safe. I don't want guys getting their bells rung and concussions. I don't want that. But I don't want any player laying off for fear of a ticky-tack penalty. You play the game all the way through. You get a penalty, you know where the line is. You got to hold off of the next one. But, I'm always going to advocate for a heavy dose of violence in the game of football because it's a violent game.
Exactly. And you talked about flipping the switch. Last topic, Chuck Filiaga versus Zach Zinter. That offense looks better and no disrespect to Chuck, who has improved. I think it's very clear. But that offense is better when Zach Zinter is in there. And to me, this guy in this line makes a difference. It makes a huge difference. So how critical, in your opinion, was it having him in there? And how much better did you think the right guard play was this week?
Well, so here's the biggest difference that I noticed between Filiaga and Zinter. When they pull the right guard over to the left side, whether it's on a kick block where you're trying to take that defensive end and get to the inside armpit and knock him out toward the sideline, or whether it's a log block where that defensive end pinches down inside and you got to log around. You got to get over there as fast as you can and then spin your hips and seal them to the inside. Zinter does that a little more athletically and fluidly than Filiaga does. There's just an ability issue there that I think Zinter looks more comfortable doing, and he's executed it a little bit better. But I do believe that what you said is also true, and that Filiaga has shown improvement, and he's gotten better. He's just not as good as Zinter in there, in my view, and it looks like the view of some others. So Zinter's in there playing with the big old mitt, the big cast on his right hand looks like, which means you can't get a hold of people like we talked about. But he's in there still being effective, and I would guess when he's back to full strength, we're probably going to see Zinter in there even more. But the important thing is injuries happen. You got to have a guy ready to go in, and it looks like Filiaga is going to be the next guard in the game, no matter who gets injured. And this experience that Filiaga is getting is a good thing because we're probably going to need him later.
Yep. Last topic. That defensive line looked pretty good. These guys are attacking. They're holding the line pretty well. And again, bigger tests to come. But there are some all Big Ten offensive linemen up there. Aiden Hutchinson absolutely chewed one up and spit one out. But it was the interior line with Mozzie Smith, Chris Hinton, even Jordan Whitley, man, 370 pounds or whatever of non-athleticism. And I'm not going to apologize for saying that.
No, he was very athletic in the plays I saw, in spite of his size.
Right, exactly. But I'm pleasantly surprised through two games. You?
Yeah, it's been refreshing, and we talked about it in our post-game podcast. Boy, it looks like they're having fun out there. This defensive line is enjoying what they're being asked to do and the success that they've had through two games. They're having a lot of fun, and of course, when you can smother teams like they did, and your offense is scoring points and long running game drives, you get nice fresh legs. So of course they're having fun. But I've been pleasantly surprised as well. I thought that Hutch was going to have a good year. He's exceeded my expectations through two games. It looks like he's off to a great year. That needs to continue. But here's what's going to happen. Offenses are going to adjust and play to him. They're going to slide protect. They're going to put tight ends over there. They're going to double team him, which means two things. Somebody else has to make a play, and somebody else now has a chance to become a star in this defensive front as well. Who will it be? There's some candidates up there that have shown an ability to get around the edge and make a play too, both up the middle as well. I really like what you said there with Hinton and the other young man. I forgot his name. I'm sorry.
Jordan Whitley.
Whitley. I'm sorry. I forgot, blanked out for a second. But if you remember when Whitley came in there, you and I talked about it in the podcast. I thought, who's this guy? Because He looks like he's, maybe not in the greatest of shape, but my Lord, he put that first play he played, he put that offensive lineman on roller skates and walked him straight back into that quarterback's lap. And then on the next play, he had an influence as well. He might have even gotten in the tackle. So they're having fun. They look comfortable in what this coach is asking them to do. The linebackers are running free. Again, these are all good indicators through 2 weeks. Every week is different. We got another challenge coming up. The season is long. Our challenges in the last 3-4 years have typically come in October and certainly into November. So let's not get too excited, but the indicators are positive. This is a great start.
He's Doug Skene. Again, Mothers Against Former Linemen. Address your letters to him. And we appreciate you being here, buddy. We will have our In the Trenches up shortly as well. We will talk about the Michigan Northern Illinois game after that game. Skene, always appreciate your time.
All right, go blue.